Once again, I have a mug for Frank and his wife. And at this time, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Frank Austin.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having us, JR. My name is Frank Austin, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July 24th of 1976. And that's a pretty good deal. It's a good deal for the LA County Sheriff's Department. It's a good deal for the ambulance drivers. It's a good deal for the judges. Good deal for the hospitals. Good deal for my family. My home group is the A Way Out group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on Monday nights. It's a men's 12-step study group. A few of our members are here. And I'm accountable in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm accountable to my sponsor, who lives in Akron, Ohio. My sponsor's 45 years sober. He's probably one of the most spiritual men I know. He and I speak at least every other week. I'll be visiting with him here in a couple of weeks. We have a granddaughter that lives in Akron, Ohio. And I'm going to go pick her up. And my sponsor and I spend 3 or 4 hours together, 2 or 3 times a year, catching up. I do a 10th step. Do a 4-step if I'm 10th step, 4th step. If I'm in the gym, I call him. And, so I'm accountable to my sponsor. He always knows where I am and what I'm doing. No mysteries. Same as our home group, our Monday night guys. I'm there as often as I can be. I'm accountable to Alcoholics Anonymous because it saved my very life. And I'm very thankful that I had the privilege of reading the wonderful big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So before I make a goofball out of myself in that area, since you guys do such a great job out of it, I have a disclaimer. I'm not an expert by any means on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a book that I love very much. I read it all the time. We were reading it this morning at our breakfast table. And so that I, once again, don't get myself in too much more trouble, I'd like to introduce my wife, Maggie, and tell you that a couple of days ago she celebrated her 26th anniversary in Alcoholics Anonymous. And as I go through sharing my experience, strength, and hope with you, you'll see how Alcoholics Anonymous is a tremendous part of our life. There's some wonderful other folks in the audience, and it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. One of our friends we haven't seen for quite some time. He called by circumstance and chance, Johnny Mack, about a week ago, and you're just not going to find a better member of AA than that guy. Our Monday night group is kind of an unusual group. We start out with the set-aside prayer, and that prayer goes along something like this: God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about you, about this book, about these steps, about myself, dear God, so that I might have a better experience with you and my fellows. And then we say, amen. So what that does for us is it invites God into our meeting, because we think it's important for God to be there. The next thing we do is, it's a little unusual, we have a 3 to 5 minute quiet meditation time, which is usually about the only time most of us meditate anyway, 3 to 5 minutes. On Monday night we get, and then we take a a person shares on a specific step. And then we have a coffee can with a bunch of names in it, and we all draw, and the person who did the step draws the names out of the can. And we like to adhere to anything in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous of the 12 and 12 that references that step. After that, we go to prayer. We ask anyone who's attending that meeting that evening if they have any family members or anyone close to them that is in need of prayer. Doesn't matter. Sometimes we have people with sick kids. Sometimes we have people with aunts and uncles, just family members who are in trouble. And our theory is that 35 to 40 guys who pray on different levels and pray with different beliefs, sooner or later one of us is going to hit the mark. And it's been proven that the blessings, to us anyway, continue to flow. We got that from the Clock Watchers group in Akron, Ohio. Actually, Stowe, Ohio, which is so it's on Monday nights. It's not far from here, only about 35, 40 miles down the, no, it's farther than that, 50 miles. We started with a group of 8 guys, and now we have 40 men there every Monday night. I'm accountable to that group. I was also blessed with receiving the program of Alcoholics Anonymous at the age of 29. I got here, came from an alcoholic family. Both my parents are dead as a direct result of the disease of alcoholism. And to the best of my knowledge, they never found the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. They just never got here. I watched both my mother and father die of alcoholism, but I didn't know until later on in my life that it was alcoholism. I thought that it looked like something else. So when you grow up in a house like that, a lot of things change, don't they? You know, if you grew up in a house where alcoholism and Paisano wine and Thunderbird was the order of the day, your life is a lot different than you would if you had a non-alcoholic life. I'm not so sure genetically if I'm predisposed to alcoholism. Some people say yes, some people say no. I don't know. The only thing I know for sure is I got it. You know, I can't tell you how I got it, but I know I got it. I have all the demonstration. I have everything that our book talks about that relates to examples of alcoholism. And I'll share some of that in a little while. But when I got here, before I got here, I went through high school. And I led 3 lives. I started drinking when I was about 15, 16 years old. And I started trouble drinking when I was 15 or 16 years old. I was a mean kid. See, I identified with restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness from the age of maybe 8 or 9 or 10 years old. I can't give you the exact date. But as a result of the kind and loving program of Al-Anon, if you will, I've been able to do some work in that area, not as much as I should, but we've gone to Al-Anon meetings. My wife, we read Al-Anon literature in our home. We have a room. It's a spiritual room in our home. During high school, I was an all-star athlete. I played 3 sports, but I led 3 lives. You know, I had this Letterman jacket with this big letter on it, and had a football and a track guy and a wrestling guy on it, but I didn't want you to know where I lived. I didn't want you to know that the house that I was living in had duct tape back then, just regular tape, that was holding what looked like a piece of carpet together. I didn't want you to know that there was Paisano bottles and Thunderbird bottles in the trash can. I didn't want you to know that when I came home at night, I'd find my little sister hiding in the bushes. My mother was down at the liquor store with her boyfriend, and my father was in Harbor General Hospital. I didn't want you to know any of that. I also didn't want you to know that I was drinking. And I'd started drinking problematic. Not so much that I was going to jail or anything like that, but what I was having is you know, we have these high school reunions. Everybody goes to these high school reunions. Well, about 20 years ago, we went to one of these high school reunions, and they put your little name tag with your picture on it. And this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey," he says, "you're Frank Austin, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And he said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I thought, "Oh man, this is going to be bad." I said, "No, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. His name was Richard. I mean, I could figure that out. He says, see this gap here in my teeth? I said, yeah. He said, you did that to me. He said, we were in a fight behind this little taco stand in the city we lived in Southern California, and you knocked my teeth out. And, I mean, I'd been sober then. So, of course, I made amends. So that gave me a clue, that and going back through my inventory of some of the activity that happened to me when I drank. The other thing that happened when I'd come home, I'd find my mother gone, and my little sister was hiding in the bushes out in front of the house, and I'd go down to the Foothill liquor store where I knew that her and her boyfriend were, and one night I captured her boyfriend in the liquor store, and I had him pinned up against the wall. And luckily for me, the Linwood Police Department walked in the front door and stopped me. See, I've had angels in my life my whole life. I just couldn't see them. I just couldn't tell you they were there. I've been blinded by hatred, anger, and deafened by resentment for most of my life until I got here. And still can be sometimes today. Still can be sometimes today. So the other guy, the third life I had was we had this midnight auto supply business. We were stealing cars and stripping them and selling them. See, my father. Well, we were car thieves. Yeah, that's what we were. But I couldn't tell you it was a break then. But what happened was they called me after I went to jail. The cop went to court with us and told the judge, if you put this kid away, you're putting the wrong kid away. Strange as it would seem. Another angel, so to speak, in my life. My father was in Harvard General Hospital one night. They called me and I drove my little bucket of bolts down there and went into my father's room, and he was laying there, severe alcoholism, stomach all distended, red nose, red veins, skinny arms, liver was going bad, eyes were yellow, had pancreatitis, had cirrhosis of the liver, he did, and he was on his way to his death. And he had these tubes plugged in him, and I walked in that room and I looked at him and I saw this guy, this red bulbous nose and these skinny arms and this mess, and I couldn't recognize him, but his name was on the chart. See? And I'd seen him earlier, maybe 2 or 3 months earlier, in this motel in Maywood, California, and he had his hand on the AM radio and he had a gallon of wine next to the bed, praying to the righteous Reverend Billy Saul Estes to find a way out of his madness, because he didn't know anything about the fellowship of the Spirit. He'd been driven to the gates of insanity and death by his alcoholism. So you take a kid like that who's starting to drink and he's starting to have trouble and things are changing, and my dad finally sobered up, and he sobered up, and the rest of his life, to the best of my knowledge, he never took another drink. Never went to Alcoholics Anonymous. Never took another drink. Now, the problem with me is sometimes what I believe isn't true. Sometimes when I was growing up, what it looked like to me wasn't the truth at all. So what I have to do when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous is sort out through my inventory what my life really looks like. An example would be, I used to tell a story that I was in this club when I was 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 years old, and they were called the Five Daggers. Back then, Bob Hope and those guys rode to Zanzibar or whatever it was. They all had sheiks of Araby, and they had these big daggers. And so one day, I'm talking to this friend of mine, and I'm chatting with him, and I said, hey, you remember the Five Daggers? And he said, the only thing I remember about the Five Daggers is you were the only member. You know, so I have a body that doesn't process booze, and I got a mind that doesn't process reality. And I'm the guy making the movie. So you take this kid that I told you about, and he's restless, irritable, discontented. He's been lifting weights, he's been working out, he's been wrestling, he's been doing all this other stuff, he's been drinking, and there's a war across across the pond, and you put this 19-year-old kid in a Marine Corps uniform, and you send him to MCRD in San Diego, and you teach him how to do things with that restlessness, that irritability, and that discontentedness. And then you send him to Vietnam. And when I went to Vietnam, I was 19 years old. And I was drinking every time I got the chance. I flew 150 night missions in Vietnam. I flew as a crew member in a gunship. I flew in an airplane called Spooky. Some people use other names for it, like Puff the Magic Dragon. But I'm drinking every day now that I get the chance, see. I'm drinking every time I can. Because when you come back at night, the next day the report, the way you figured out if you did any good or not was the body count from the day before. Now I'm drinking. I'm drinking to forget what happened the day before. Okay. But you crawl in the airplane and you pray to a God that you don't believe in because of what you came through. And you pray that if you go down that night someplace in North Vietnam, that they're not going to take you to a POW camp, because we used to fly into the DMZ. And you're 19 years old and you're drinking as much as you possibly can, and now you're starting to fight with the other guys, and you come home and you marry this. And I'm not going to. The Marine Corps is not responsible for my alcoholism. Vietnam is not responsible for my alcoholism. That's just part of my deal. I spent, as I said, 13 months in Vietnam, and I drank every time I got the chance. So I'm a Vietnam Marine combat veteran, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm almost 21 years old, and you bring me home, and I'm a mess. See? And now my drinking's getting worse. But it doesn't look like my drinking's getting worse. Now I'm drinking when I don't want to drink. I'm drinking when I'm promising people I'm not going to drink, I'm drinking. See? When I'm telling you I'm not going to drink anymore, I drink anyway, because I'm powerless over alcohol. My life seemed to be certainly unmanageable. And if you look at the fact that back then I'm just like the guy that Dr. Silkworth talks about in the book, but nobody ever said to me, "You're an outright mental defect and full flight from reality." Of course, I was carrying a loaded .45 most of the time. Maybe that held them off. But nobody ever said that to me. You know what I mean? So now my drinking's getting worse, and I'm starting to get in trouble. And I married this starry-eyed chick, and I'm wrecking cars, and I'm fighting in the streets. And in the Marine Corps, when you do things like that, they kind of turn their other head. So I stayed in the Corps. I got out of the Corps, and I'm drinking, and my drinking's getting worse. And now I'm starting to carry a loaded .45 wherever I go, and I'm drinking in Compton, California. You remember what Compton is? LA? Nice neighborhood, right? The Leaky Tiki Lounge in Huntington Park, California. And sometimes when I drank, I got taller. Sometimes when I drank, I was better looking. Sometimes when I drank, I was a better dancer. And sometimes when I drank, I thought you thought, the girl down at the end of the bar, or whoever she was, I thought she thought I was better looking. Because by this time I'd become a mind reader. And the more I drank, the worse it got. See? I had an orange leisure suit. Anybody have leisure suits here? You guys probably have grandfathers that have. They have pictures of their uncles on the family albums. You open the family album. They're polyester, right? Yeah, and they got these big collars. Mine was burnt orange. Pretty awesome, huh? A burnt orange leisure suit. The only problem is you can't sleep in a car in a burnt orange leisure suit for too many days. And now trouble's starting to come. Now real trouble's starting to come. Now I'm drinking when I don't want to drink. And back then it was 8-track tapes, man. You had 8-track tapes, and you're putting Iron Butterfly on the 8-track tape, man. And you're drinking everything you can drink. They had this stuff called Spinata, but I didn't screw with any of that stuff. You might as well get right to the stuff, man. Starting to puke up blood. Starting to fight in the bars. starting to hide out in the bushes, starting to wait for them to come. Not going home. And when I do go home, she's there. And I'm a tough guy, so I hold hostages, see? And I'm drinking against my own will. I have no power over alcohol. I'm drinking Mangold Steakhouse in Compton, California with a loaded .45 in my belt across the street from the Brothers of the Sun, a black motorcycle gang. 2 doors down right across the street, and we stand outside and kind of look at each other. Who's going to move next? But I'm a drunk driver also. I place people at risk when I drive. I'm insane. I can't tell you. At 6 o'clock in the morning, one morning, I got up and went to work, and to the best of my knowledge on that morning, it was not that this was not going to happen, that at 10:30 that night, I was going to run into a family down in California into the back of their car, and they were on their way home from the movies. I put a couple of them in the hospital. I'm selfish and self-centered, and my drinking is so bad that I can't tell you, even though I want to stop drinking, I can't stop drinking. And no matter what happens, I've been arrested before, and now I'm going absolutely crazy. I'm insane. I have a disease of a threefold nature, but I don't know that. I don't know that I have a physical allergy to alcohol. I don't know that I'm insane with respect to alcohol, and I certainly don't know that I have a grave spiritual malady. It appeared to me then that alcohol was my solution. But I started to pray to this God that I didn't believe in. And I was arrested on the Long Beach freeway on my way to Las Vegas to break the bank. I had a Datsun B210 that's loaded .45 automatic, a case of beer, and a quart of whiskey. And a couple of weeks prior to this, I can vaguely remember, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I don't have the time frame. I remember praying to this God that I don't believe in for help, because by now my body's starting to come apart. I'm starting to puke up blood, see? When I'm throwing up, it's not getting any better, it's only getting worse. And I want to quit drinking, but I can't quit drinking. So I get arrested by these highway patrolmen. You know, you have the TV program now where it's intervention on the TV. And they sit down in this nice room in a hotel. They got these padded chairs. Margie, will you please go to Alcoholics Anonymous? Or whatever they say. I don't know what they say. You know, we want. Mine was a .357 Magnum. Pointed right in my face, get in the car. I had 5 highway patrolmen doing an intervention on me. That's kind of what it takes to get my attention. You know, there wasn't any. People used to ask. I don't know if anybody used to ask you. Do you ever quit? Anybody ever ask you, why do you drink like that? Why do you drink the way you do? What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? People used to ask me that all the time. What's the matter with you? Given all the information you have, what's the matter? Why do you keep drinking? I couldn't tell them I have the chronic mind of an alcoholic. I couldn't tell them I'm selfish and I'm self-centered. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And when I drink, I step on the toes of others and they retaliate, seemingly without provocation. That's me. Okay? And my troubles, I couldn't tell you, my troubles were basically of my own making. Then they arose out of myself. And that I was an extreme example of self-will run riot. Couldn't tell you that, because I didn't know that. I didn't know that I had an allergy of a threefold. I didn't know that I had a physical allergy. I couldn't tell you that once I put booze in my body, all the bets were over. I couldn't tell you that before that I was restless, irritable, discontented. Once I got to the 3rd and Vignes jail in downtown Los Angeles. Got shot one more time. I'm in there and there's this guy. And he's laying on this bench. Got a bulbous nose. His arms are real skinny. His stomach is distended. The veins are popped out in his face. His eyes are yellow. He turns over and looks at me and says, "What are you in here for, kid?" And I looked at that guy, and I thought, that's me. That's my father. I've seen that guy before. That's me. And if I don't get some help, that's going to be me. Because I'd been hiding in front of the dresser, rolled up in a ball with a loaded .45 automatic, crying, with nightmares and sweats. Couldn't quit drinking. I've been doing all that stuff, wanting to find an answer. Let me stop. If you're here and you're one of those young guys that's just come back, or you have a family member that didn't come back from one of these places, Iraq, Afghanistan, Fallujah, any of those places, I want to tell you I understand that. I want you to tell you that I understand all that. Combat, come back, drink, what it looks like. And I know where I can get help for you. Even inside the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you have a loved one that's passed as a result of one of those, I'm terribly sorry for that. I have empathy for you. I hold and cherish those men deeply, men and women. Some of them are terrible alcoholics. Some of the ones that didn't come home with us, and that's out of the realm of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's all I'll say about that. But when I got here, I've been praying to this God that I didn't believe in, and he sent me to the Monday Night Big Book group of Bellflower, California. And I walked in the door and I met the very man that was going to save my life, but I didn't think he was going to save my life. Because when I saw that guy in the hospital and when I saw that guy in the jail cell, and I got this glimpse, I don't know if that man was real or not. He could have been an angel. Just passing through. Maybe sometimes you see those angels today. Maybe you've been in the fellowship of the Spirit long enough to realize that such things exist. Well, I met angels called Bill Honeycutt. I know he was real. He was a crooked little man with a crooked little hat and a crooked little cane. About this big. And he walked up to me and he stuck out his hand. He said, "Welcome to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm glad you're here." Or something such as that. He took my hand and got me a cup of coffee. He wasn't so interested in being the cool guy in the corner chatting with all his buddies. He was really interested in saving somebody's life. He was interested in being in service in Alcoholics Anonymous. So he stuck out his hand to me, of all people. As angry as I was. Billy Smith says that guys like us are locked in the pissed off position. And I was. You know, I walked in the meeting with a loaded .45 automatic in the back of my belt and a light blue jacket on. And I'm still packing because I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of you, I'm afraid of it, I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid of drinking, I'm afraid of not drinking. I'm no God. No power greater than myself. But God came to me through Bill Honeycutt and his brother Frank Honeycutt. And I'd sit in those meetings and I'd listen to guys like Chuck Chamberlain and Norm Alpe. And I heard Chuck maybe 15 or 20 times. I swear to God, every time I heard him, I knew whatever he said was wonderful, but I couldn't tell you what he said. I had no idea. It made no sense. He's speaking about things that I couldn't understand. He's talking about God. He's talking about living free. He's talking about being a free man. He was talking about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and a relationship with a power greater than himself. And so was Norm Alpe. And Norm Alpe could give 4 AA talks in 1 hour. You know. So the great pleasure that I had was those men and women, Ruthie M. and those folks were still alive. And I had the great pleasure of being placed right in the middle of all that. And Bill Honeycutt got me in service right away. And so I quit drinking on July 24th of 1976. And the difference between me and Bill Honeycutt was when I met Bill Honeycutt, his lights were on. He didn't have God out here. He had God in here. He'd found that deep down inside where the great reality is in each and every one of us, he'd found that God. He'd found that relationship. And his commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous was service. And so he got me in service in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they got me a job as the assistant coffee maker at my home group. You don't want to give a guy like me a full-time coffee maker. So I did that job to the best of my ability until they took a group conscience one night. And the group conscience was that the coffee maker did not need to be armed. Pretty sharp, huh? I mean, they got it. I didn't get it. They got it. So the group conscience, they asked Bill to ask me if I would put my loaded 45 in the trunk of the car and not bring it in the meeting anymore. See, you guys get it. Yeah. You have group consciences, right? I mean, maybe you probably never had one like that. But you get the general idea. And so then they promoted me to the coffee maker. And I had wonderful people that I had. The difference was that the people that were in my life had changed completely. They had his brother, Frank Honeycutt, another wonderful man. They lived by the example of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they demonstrated through the way they lived, not by the way they talked behind a microphone, but the way they conducted themselves in Alcoholics Anonymous. So we'd go all over the place, and one of the things Bill did for me in my early sobriety is he gave me a rock, and he'd say, "Frank, I want you to have this God rock." And I say, "Well, God rock?" He'd say, "Yeah." He said, "I need you to have this rock. It's a God rock." And I'd say, "Why do I need a God rock?" You're talking riddles. And he said, "Well, so when trouble comes, and it surely will, you need to rub this rock so God can hear." Well, he owned a circus. I mean, a carnival guy, so he's got tricks. Right? You know, he's always tricking me into something. Coffee maker, K2 word, service, getting out of myself. Quit thinking about you. Start thinking about somebody else. Your problem is that you always thought more about you and less about everybody else. He said, "So you need to rub this rock so God can hear." I thought, rub this rock so God can hear. Okay. If you say so, Bill. You know why I did that? Because everything he told me so far worked. Now, one thing he told me didn't work. He said, if you can get out of yourself long enough to be the coffee maker, either at your home group or the K2 ward, or go with me to the Lakewood Mental Health Center, or wherever we were going, you just might stand a chance to quit thinking about yourself long enough to be able to be relieved of the bondage of self with the help of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay, Bill, whatever you say. And then he'd demonstrate through the way that he lived. He'd say, he'd come and get us, or we'd meet him someplace, and he'd say, "Okay, everybody give me $2. And we'd all put $2 in this little bag, and we'd go to Vaughn's Market. And back then, for $10 or $12, $15, you could get 2 or 3 bags of groceries. And so we'd get these 2 or 3 bags of groceries, and somehow, some way, he knew where these people lived. And he'd say, "Now go up there and knock on that door and hand these people those groceries. Because they don't have anything, and you got $2. Come on, Bill. What does that have to? I don't get it. You don't have to get it. You just have to do it. Okay. So we did it. And then in my 18th month of sobriety, my 18-month-old child got sick, and he went into Children's Hospital. And I'd done the steps, and I'd been in service to a certain degree, not all the steps. I was on my way. And my kid was in a coma laying in Children's Hospital, and now I'm rubbing this rock so God can hear. But I'd done the steps. I'd gone all the way to 4 or 5, and now I'm not asking God for my will in these matters. I'm asking God for His will in these matters and the power to carry that out. So my son's laying in this bed in this coma, and he's 18 months old. His eyes are closed, and I'm powerless. My life's unmanageable. And they tell us if he does live, he'll probably be blind or deaf or all the above. He's got viral encephalitis. And now I start rubbing this rock so God can hear. And who shows up? You people. Angels. With skin on them. God with skin on them. And you gave me each and every day with God and Bill Honeycutt and the other family members the power to be able to get through that and not take a drink and not go crazy and not hurt anybody. Because if you were anything like me when you got here, I was real sick of me. And Bill used to come down to the hospital, and he'd sit in the hospital in the waiting room, just like you people did. My kid was in this coma. And gradually we were praying for God's will in this matter and the power to carry that out. And I saw the very thing that I could not see. I saw God with skin on him. I saw God with skin on her. I saw angels show up that didn't have to come there. They didn't have to go there. They didn't have to give of themselves so that someone else could live, but they did. They did. And he began to wake up, and he woke up, and we'd say, Gordon, if you can hear us, please squeeze our little hand. And he'd squeeze our finger in his little hand, and I'm praying for God's will. And today he had 21 major surgeries, and he woke up and he was paralyzed. We used to tie his shoes together. And I'm 19, 20 months sober, and my kid's ringing a bell on his bed. I'm running upstairs to suction his throat out. And I was thankful to be sober so I could do that. Thankful to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous so I could be a father. Father I was always supposed to be. They took the trach out 4 years later, and people would poke fun at us. And they'd say, what's the matter with your kid's throat? Why's he got that shoestring around his neck? Cruel people, huh? What do you do with people like that? You forgive them. So today he's 41, and he has our granddaughter. Her name is Ariana, and she's 4, and they live in Portland, Oregon. And I was just up there a couple months ago, and she's a ball of fire, man. I don't know where she gets it, but she's a ball of fire. She's a special soul. And his brother was born the day they took the trach out, and his brother was born with a birth defect called biliary atresia. And the last trimester of pregnancy, the common bile duct doesn't develop. And I'm sober, and I'm doing my best to go to meetings and take these steps and read this book. Read this book. Like it tells us on 112 up in the corner. It says, read this book. And so they tell me my kid's got this disease and that I brought her home with me from Vietnam. It's Agent Orange related. Now, the minute particles of Agent Orange that I have floating around in my bloodstream are so small that they're infinitesimal. It's one way you can get it. So my second son had 4 major surgeries, and he lived to be 23 and a half months old. In the last year of his life, his mother and I took blood clots out of his diapers every third night, and I literally watched my son die one day at a time. Sober and Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know what your big deal is, But let me tell you 2 quick stories. He passed away, and the day my son passed away, I took his little body away from his mother's arms, and I kissed his discoloring body goodbye, and I was thankful to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thankful to be a dad that could take him to the hospital and hold him in my arms, and I wasn't Mr. Perfect. Sometimes all we really get is right here, right now, isn't it? That's all we really get. And his mother and I divorced, and I was able to treat her with kindness and dignity. 2 quick stories. I'm in the hospital one night, and I'm walking down the halls because I can't sleep, and all the lights are out, and I'm walking. They're just like a big spoke wheel. And I see this little kid, and he's got this bald head and this rack, and he's wandering down the hall, and I sit down and I talk to him. Vietnam Marine, tough guy, broken heart, broken dreams. And I asked this kid, I say, well, what's going on? He says, I did something like this. He says, I got cancer. I said, you do? Yeah. I said, well, how old are you? He said, I'm 9. I said, I'm 9. I said, 9. He says, I'm going to get better and I'm going to play baseball someday. I said, I know you are. And he was 9 shooting for 10. Trying to get to 10. And some of us are 40 and we're having trouble getting to 41. Alcoholism's in our way. And we just simply won't do what we're supposed to do. We just can't do it. We can't open this book, or we won't. So through all that, a couple of weeks ago, we were over at this friend of our house, and she's a famous author, 15, 16 books, and they have a school in Southeast Asia. She's telling this story in one of her books about this kid named Olivia. And Olivia has a terrible lung disease. And Olivia's been sick since she was 8 years old. And a lot of sober members of AA in this thing. And they're talking about Olivia and the angels and the gifts that Olivia's received. And she reads this story about Olivia, and Olivia is 15 now. And she says, what I'd like to do, she says, I would like to have Olivia play a song for you. She's a published artist now, Olivia is. Olivia says, I don't know how long I'm going to live. So I live one day at a time. 15. She sings this song about her mother and her father. She says, I know they want me to get well. I know they'd give anything they could possibly give for me to be rid of this disease. I know they'd give everything they have. But all I've ever really wanted was love. All I've ever really wanted from them is love. Because that's all they can really give me, is love. I submit to you that that's all we have to give you, is love. My wife and I married 13 years ago. We have 3 grandchildren. We've been fortunate enough to travel some. We're going to Scotland next year, if everything works right. They've asked us to come over there and share a little bit. We were in France last year. 2 things, and I'll try to wrap it up. I've had so many things happen to me that I can't explain to you because they're inexplainable to me. I simply see things today that I could not see before. I'm not a shaman. I know what those people are and who they are. I understand a little bit about dreams, who comes and who goes. I understand about Carl Jung in our book and the dreams he had and how he got to where he was on the spiritual travel. But I'm standing at my son's grave one day and I said, God, I don't know why I'm here. And the voice as loud and clear as I'm talking to you right now says, Frank, you're here because you need to know that your son has been with me since the day he left the face of the earth. I said, really, God? Any more to that? And he says, yeah, Frank. He says something like this. God, as I understand God. He says, you know, Frank, I've been trying to talk to you for most of your life, but you couldn't listen. Your ego was always in the way, and your alcoholism. And this is what I heard. He said, in order for me to talk to you, I had to send you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Where the very people that could save your life would speak to you. In a language in which you most probably can understand now has always been a language of the heart. It's where the heart speaks and the heart listens. He says, you know, Frank, you're my child. Man. In the south of France, I walk into this 500-year-old, we're staying in this 500-year-old villa, and there's this chateau down the street. It's on the Santiago de Compostela or Compostela de Saint Jacques, the path of St. James, that they would walk on the spiritual journey. And I get down from this villa that we're staying in. Some of our friends invited us to come and stay. It's another gift. And I walk into this chateau, and this cold wind blows through me. I hear this voice say, where have you been? Where have you been? We've been waiting for you. You've been here before. It's happened to me in Hawaii. It's happened to me in a lot of different places. And I think it's happened to me because sometimes I'm awake. I know alcoholism is about drinking, but I'm not unconscious anymore. I make a conscious contact with a God. I'm not asleep anymore. I'm awake. They asked Buddha one time, if I can get this correct and not mess it up. They said to the Buddha, are you a God? He said, no. They said, are you a prophet? He said, no. He said, what are you? He said, I'm awake. I'm awake. I submit to you that if you're willing to put forth the effort to do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in the manner in which they're designed for us to do, that you'll become awake. And your awakenings will be different, each and every one of you. And I can't tell you what a privilege it's been for me to be here and share my experience, strength, and hope with you. We didn't come very far. We have a little cabin up the street here. God talks to me when I'm standing in the canyon on the rocks by the river. My problem today is getting out of my own way. Getting out of my own way. Because I still have difficulty getting out of my own way. So I ask God each and every day to help me get out of my own way. Some days I do real good, some days I don't. So join us in the fellowship of the Spirit, where we all think alike, and we're all heading in the same direction. And great events will come to pass for you and countless others. Thank you.
Closing. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answer will come if your own house is in order. But you obviously cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and for countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Can we circle